Welcome back. We are on the way to meet Aswath Damodaran at the Stern School of Business in the middle of the buzzing streets of Manhattan. He is the 2013 recipient of the Herbert Simon Award of Rajk College. We welcome you into his office for a discussion about his body of work and personal experiences along the way.
I'm Aswath Damodaran. I teach at the Stern School of Business. I've been teaching here since 1986. I teach two topics, corporate finance and valuation. My field of interest is finance in general, anything to do with financial markets and financial decision making. Business valuation is attaching a number to any kind of business. You need it either because you run the business, you've started the business, you might need capital for the business, so when you go out and ask people for capital, you need to know the value. If you're trying to sell your business, you need to know how much to sell it for. In the context of publicly traded companies, it's how you value shares, whether you want to invest in shares or not. So pretty much anybody who runs a for-profit business is interested in valuation, whether they know it or not. It's at the core of why you run businesses. I find valuation to be a fairly unique combination of numbers and stories. I mean, if you take something like accounting, it's all numbers all the time. If you take something like strategy, it's all stories all the time. Valuation requires that you move back and forth between stories and numbers. To me, that combination is what attracts me to valuation.
We wanted to find out how should we approach the valuation process in developing economies, and how should the governments encourage progress.
All of Eastern Europe has an issue that goes beyond politics. Eastern Europe is aging. The contrast between a Hungary and a Malaysia or an Asian country is they're both developing markets, they're both emerging markets, but the bulk of Asia is still young, so there's a lot of young people coming into the environment. Whereas in Eastern Europe, you're losing your young people. They're going to the rest of Europe. So when you have an aging population and an aging economy, it's like trying to climb uphill. So no matter how good the political environment is, you cannot grow as quickly as an Asian economy can simply because you have an older population. The way they're tackling them right now is they're moving away. They're not staying because, and I don't blame them. You cannot fight the fight for a country individually. You're 22, 23, 24. You're looking to see where the opportunities lie for you. So I don't blame you for moving away. I think in a sense, you have to create a vibrant economic environment where people want to stay. You cannot appeal to people's patriotic duty and say you have to stay to make the country stronger. That's never worked. So you have to create something that you have to have excitement in business. You have to have startups and young companies. What creates excitement is those kinds of businesses where people want to stay. So I think Eastern Europe has to find a way to make itself exciting again for people to want to stay. It won't come from old, boring businesses. Yes. For markets to develop, you've got to let control go. Yes. The problem in Eastern Europe is governments want to have their cake and eat it too. They want the capital that comes from having free markets and financial markets, but they still want to control the outcomes. They want a controlled economy. They don't like chaos. No government does, but the nature of markets is you've got to let control go. In other words, you want to see vibrancy, what you have to do is accept the fact that you've got to be willing to live with chaos. And I'm not sure that Eastern European governments are willing to live with chaos. And people have to accept chaos as well, right? And in a sense, Eastern Europeans, I don't blame you, don't want chaos. You've seen what chaos can do to you. So you want all of that stuff to happen. It's not going to come from the top down. It's got to come from the bottom up. It's got to come from excitement in the market, and excitement comes from chaos, and chaos comes from giving up control.
Faster business life cycles of today, the ever-changing technological environment, and disruptive innovation all make valuation harder for investors. The question remains, how can the valuation process help us make sense of such challenges?
The economies of the 20th century were not 10 to 20 years, they were 100 years, 120, 150 years. Because we were a great company in the 20th century, you were a GE or a Ford or a GM. It took you almost 50 years to build up, then you lived at the top for about 30 or 40 years, then you went into a long slide. The companies of today have much shorter life cycles. It affects your valuation in the sense that when you project out cash flows now, you have to think about how quickly companies peak. So they grow much faster, they peak much more quickly, then they slide much faster. Yahoo from birth to death lasted 25 years. It went from 0 to 100 billion in 8 years, and from 100 billion back down to zero in about 8 to 10 years. What that effectively means in valuation is you can't assume that things continue forever, which is the way we've historically done valuation. Now, do investors think short-term or long-term? That has nothing to do with life cycle. Investors, whether they think short-term or long-term, depends on their investment philosophy. Most people want to make money in 6 months, a year, or 2 years, and guess what? If you want to make money quickly, you've never cared about value, ever. I don't know why they do, because I've said repeatedly that disruption is easy. Making money on disruption is difficult. It's easy to go in and be disruptive. It's very difficult to make money on disruption. All the companies you named have disrupted their businesses. Netflix has changed the entertainment business. Tesla has changed the automotive business. Airbnb is changing the hotel business. Uber is changing the car service business. They've accomplished that. What they haven't accomplished is figuring out how to make money off the disruption. I do think investors attach too much weight to growth. Growth in revenues, these companies are growing, and they are. They attach too much value to number of users, number of subscribers, number of customers. I don't think they attach enough value to business models. And what you're going to see is there's going to be a shakeout. It doesn't mean that they're being irrational, it's just that they're being over-optimistic. I call this the big market delusion. When you're going after a big market, investors get overexcited.
You're a passionate teacher, well known all over the world. Where does your drive come from, and what would be your impact on society?
When I tell people the story of how I became a teacher, I was a TA, I was doing my MBA, I was going to do what MBAs traditionally do, is get a job, but, make a lot of money. And I became a teaching assistant in the last quarter of my second year as an MBA. I needed it because I needed the money. And I remember walking into that classroom the first day, and 15 minutes in, I knew that this was what I wanted to do the rest of my life. It was pure luck. I think universities have lost their mission. Universities should be about teaching, but they're not. They're about research and making sure faculty live good lives, and I think universities have lost the influence they used to have on society because they've lost their way. I think that they need to remember we talked about disruption? This is the business that needs disruption the most. For 1,000 years, universities have had this monopoly on education, and they've really screwed it up. They've screwed it up because they have no competition. You know what? We need disruption here. And that disruption, I hope, comes sooner rather than later, because we need to go back to realizing that the fundamental reason we have universities is to teach people. I remember Lincoln after the Civil War said, when he was giving the Gettysburg Address, ironically, he said, "The world will little note nor long remember what's been said here." And I'm under no illusions that anything that I say or do is somehow going to have a lasting change in the world. So I don't write because I want to change the way the world is going to be for the future. Change for me will come in the classroom. I change the world one student at a time. That's why I've always said I'm a teacher first and everything else later. I'm not an academic, I'm not a researcher, because none of that stuff is going to stick. The world is going to change, people are going to find new things, but the students I affect in the classroom are my lasting change to the world.